After going bankrupt, I unexpectedly obtained an invisibility cloak. Homeless, I put on the invisibility cloak and sneaked into my archenemy's house. As soon as I opened the door, I saw James, steaming from the bathroom. What did I see? This guy's figure is even more impressive than I imagined. As soon as I spoke, James, who was drying his hair, couldn't hold it in anymore. He started swearing at the air. What the hell is making that noise? I closed my eyes and held my breath in the corner. There was only one thought in my mind. It's over, it's over. It seems James is definitely going to get a sty in his eye tonight. In fact, I still underestimated the situation. I got into trouble before evening. There was a rush of heat at the tip of my nose, and something gushed out forcefully. We're all guys. Just a glance shouldn't cause this, right? Incredulous, I covered my nose and rushed towards the roll of toilet paper on the table like a flapping fish. I was also tripped hard by a chair on the way. I endured the sharp pain without making a sound. I panicked and grabbed at the paper. The more panicked I got, the worse it became. So I watched helplessly as one end of the roll of paper was in my hand. One end rolled gurglingly to James' feet. James dressed very quickly. He looked back at the paper under his feet. Then he looked at a strip of paper hanging in mid-air. There was an eerie silence. The next second, he dialed his good friend Oliver's phone. He spoke straightforwardly. Can I stay at your place? There are evil spirits in my house. I can't stay here at all. James was rejected. Having failed to check in, he stood still, his eyes searching around the room. Suddenly, I felt guilty. James and I were well-known arch enemies in the whole school, but it was a bit immoral to scare him like this. Moreover, I had just seen his whole body. Just as the guilt hit me for a second, the next moment came James' pious prayer. All the gods above, don't scare me. I've done countless good deeds in my life. I have extremely high moral standards and I'm too timid to be scared. If you really want to scare someone, I'd like to recommend someone. A bad feeling welled up in me. I looked up and saw that James had taken out a photo on a blue background from somewhere. James recommended with a smile. Some people have empty heads and don't remember things. They forget right away and can be scared again the next day. I can't do it. I have a good memory and will remember for a long time. The photo looked a bit familiar, but I wasn't sure. I leaned in for a closer look and saw my own face. The little bit of guilt suddenly shrank back. James isn't a very nice person, but the food he cooks is really good. I sat across from him and took a few mouthfuls when he wasn't paying attention. Maybe I was really hungry and unexpectedly found it delicious. I was satisfied, but James stared silently at the plate that was half empty after only a few bites. He called again. There's something dirty. It's stealing my food. There was a few seconds of silence on the other end, and then suddenly someone burst out laughing. Dude, I'm just saying, even if there really is something dirty, if it can eat your cooking, you should marry it. James frowned. I frowned too and started to panic. What does that mean? Is there something wrong with my sense of taste? At night, I carefully lay down on the sofa, get ready to take a short nap. Suddenly, I heard my name coming from the bedroom. James was full of energy at night. He called Oliver again. Can you believe it? Henry dared to block me. How dare he? There was a lot of noise from Oliver's side, accompanied by a well-known DJ track. He said lazily in his voice, can you two stop having conflicts all the time like a couple in a relationship? James smiled and said, are you drunk? Yes. Oliver replied with a grunt. I'll go to your place later. Remember to open the door. Don't be annoying. I won't be at home later. James hung up the phone expressionlessly. Then he frowned and looked at the red exclamation mark on his phone. I thought carefully. It seemed that I had indeed blocked James. I've had too many fights with him and forgotten the reasons. James rubbed his head and pointed at the screen. Henry, I advise you to unblock me within a day. Otherwise, I'll make public the fact that you got drunk and kissed me. These words jolted me awake in an instant. I stared at James in the bed in disbelief. Don't slander me. If you are unkind, don't blame me for being unjust. I rolled up my sleeves and prepared to give James a good education of love in the dead of night. The bedroom door was not closed. James was playing Snake on the bed out of boredom. I strode in and was just about to punch that punchable face. But before I could even raise my fist, suddenly, the invisibility cloak gave an alarm, and a voice rang in my head. Warning! Warning! The invisibility cloak is about to fail. I, who was secretly overjoyed, suddenly froze in place. What is malfunctioning? Before I could react, the warning sound rang out again, urgent and piercing. Each sound was louder than the last. Entering countdown. 5-4. I was standing by James' bedside, as if struck by lightning. You can't be serious. At this time? James was spreading rumors just a second ago that I forcefully kissed him. And the next second, he'll find me showing up in his house. In the bedroom. By the bedside. What will he think? He won't think that I'm lusting after his body. Will he? I can't even begin to imagine. I glanced at the living room some distance away from me. Then I glanced under the bed again. Gritting my teeth, I dived in without hesitation, because I was going too fast. I banged my head on the edge of the bed. I gritted my teeth and didn't make a sound. Just as I crawled in, the countdown ended and the sound system started. James on the bed sat up, suspiciously wondering, what the hell made that thud just now? I covered my head and sneered, what the hell? What else could it be but my head? Before my heart could calm down, I saw James suddenly get out of bed. His puzzled voice came from above. I somehow feel like it's under the bed. Please, I'm begging you. Can you not be so overly curious? However, James, who has been at odds with me for years, always does the opposite of what I want, saying that he actually bent down and looked under the bed. I clenched my fists and made up my mind that if James really dared to look at me, I would punch him unconscious. The next second, the doorbell suddenly rang, accompanied by a hasty knock on the door. James, who was halfway bent over, straightened up again. After being stunned for a few seconds, he still chose to open the door first. I loosened my fists and let out a sigh of relief. My good reputation is saved. It was Oliver and his group who were knocking on the door. A rough glance showed that there were probably 7 or 8 of them. James obviously didn't intend to let them in. He glanced at them and quickly decided to close the door, but was stopped by Oliver. James was impatient. Not at home. I don't care, Oliver said with a smile as he pushed the door. A brother's home is my home. James couldn't resist them alone. After the door opened, he stared at Oliver irritably and asked, "Are you a dog? Aren't you scared?" As soon as Oliver arrived, he slumped on the sofa. It's only right for a good brother to come and keep you company. Now the living room was full. At a glance, all the faces were familiar brothers. I was lying under the bed, not daring to move. The invisibility cloak won't work again for another 2 hours. I could only stay in a rigid position and listen to their nonsense. At first, they chatted about trivial things, and then suddenly the topic turned to me. I can't get in touch with Henry. He doesn't answer the phone either. James, can you get through to him? Mentioning this, James' face turned even worse. Damn it, I'm blocked. He blocked you again. I kind of feel like you two are in a relationship. Don't say that. Well, don't really say it. Once the topic was opened, everyone started chatting away. If Henry weren't a guy, I'd really suspect you two are dating. You two flirt with each other every day. Impossible. James clearly is a straight guy. Oliver just smiled and said nothing. James didn't seem to want to interrupt either. Only I was lying under the bed, squeezing my fists so hard they were about to break. Who would want to date this guy? I couldn't stand it anymore and angrily closed my eyes. The next second, I seemed to hear something rolling from the living room. Broken words came into my ears. It fell towards the bedroom. Under the bed. These words kept swirling in my mind, and I suddenly panicked. What under the bed? Did something fall under the bed here? The sound of footsteps gradually approached. I instantly woke up and suddenly opened my eyes. I made eye contact with James, who was bending down and kneeling halfway under the bed, ready to look for something. I'm most afraid of the sudden silence in the air. I was lying awkwardly under the bed, and James was kneeling halfway beside the bed. The eye contact lasted for 3 seconds. James finally, as expected, blurted out a swear word, mixed with 3 parts of absurdity, 4 parts of confusion, and 7 parts of doubting life. Anyone would have this reaction if they saw their archenemy under their own bed in the middle of the night. James' voice was not very loud, but it was enough to make everyone in the living room quiet. I'm devastated. My heart split into 8 pieces with this swear word. When the good brothers in the living room heard this, they also walked towards the bedroom one after another. The sound of footsteps was getting closer. It's over. Completely over. My good reputation is ruined, and I'm going to be disgraced. I let out a long breath, while deciding whether to knock these people out or bury them alive. I heard someone wonderingly ask James, "Brother Chi, what are you doing looking under the bed?" I don't understand. There's nothing under the bed. Nothing? I sat up in shock as if a dying man. Only then did a belated prompt slowly ring in my mind. The invisibility cloak has restored its effect. Have a pleasant use. What a pleasant use you're talking about. It was a close call. I took advantage of the large crowd and crawled out awkwardly from the side. What a goddamn life full of ups and downs. A group of people looked all around under the bed but found nothing unusual. Someone couldn't help asking, "James, what did you just see?" James came to his senses and slowly picked up the thing that had fallen under the bed. "Oh," he said calmly. "It's nothing. I just saw a dog." "Me, you're the dog." "I didn't know Brother Chi had a dog." "I didn't see it." A group of people found nothing and went back to the sofa. James said slowly, "Well, my dog likes to play hide and seek with people." I clenched my fists tightly. However, what does he mean by this? Could he have found out something? I thought about what James said all night. The eye contact only lasted for 2 seconds. Normal people should just treat it as an illusion, right? But James, he is not a normal person. But no matter how abnormal he is, he can't possibly think of the invisibility cloak thing. After all, this matter is extremely absurd. If I hadn't experienced it myself, I wouldn't believe it even if a knife was held to my neck. As soon as Oliver and the others left, I quietly observed James' reaction. If he knew I was in his house, he would surely make a huge fuss. But now, James is so calm as if nothing had happened. It seems that he also thought it was an illusion. As soon as I relaxed, James suddenly started acting strangely. He began to change clothes frequently. He took off the newly changed clothes soon and put on another set. Every time he changed, I was forced to admire this guy James' figure. I have to say, it's really quite charming. Although peeping is not a gentlemanly act, it's also an honor for James to be admired by me. Moreover, he often stole my clothes when I was taking a shower before. I was watching excitedly when suddenly I had a bad feeling. There was a rush of heat in my nose and something started to trickle out. This damned familiar feeling. I was both angry and shocked. I could accept getting a nosebleed when looking at beautiful women. Why do I keep having problems when looking at men? I've seen men before. Why has it been so strange lately? I covered my nose and ran towards the table. This time, I didn't let the toilet paper fall on the ground. With great difficulty, I managed to stuff my nose clumsily. Then I turned around and heard a very soft laugh from James. I was inexplicably annoyed and ashamed. What's he laughing at? At noon, I sat at the dinner table with my nose blocked. I swallowed my saliva looking at the food on the table. James made me lose so much blood. It's reasonable for me to eat a few mouthfuls of food, right? After James finished cooking, he didn't rush to eat. He sat on the sofa and played games. Since he's not eating, I'll do it. I unceremoniously stuffed 2 mouthfuls of vegetables into my mouth. Before I could swallow, I suddenly started coughing. This level of spiciness. Is this something a human can eat? I started coughing violently and paced around the kitchen. Strangely enough, I couldn't find the glass of water that had been on the table just now. The spiciness shot straight up. When I was so spicy that I was furious, lost my mind and went completely crazy. Suddenly, a hand stretched out from the living room sofa. A calm voice came over, saying, "The water is here." I looked in the direction of the voice, and there was a glass of clear water held steadily in that person's hand. The appearance of this water was even more timely than providing help in the snow. Overjoyed, I didn't care about anything and directly took it and drank it all up. The ice, cold water entered my mouth and barely suppressed the rising fire. I let out a sigh of relief and subconsciously said, "Thank." Halfway through my words, I suddenly froze with the glass in my arms. The air seemed to freeze at this moment. The living room was completely silent. I lowered my head little by little and saw James lounging on the sofa. His outstretched arm hadn't been put down yet, still holding the glass in the same position. Looking this way, the smile on his lips grew deeper and deeper. I swallowed hard. I almost wanted to bite my own tongue off. "What on earth are you thanking for?" James smiled menacingly and spoke slowly, word by word. "Henry, you sure enough are here. I'm exposed. I'm caught." He knows very well that I can't handle spicy food. He put super spicy stuff in the dishes. I gritted my teeth and said, "You're really bad." James also laughed and said, "I cooked the meal myself. Are you blaming me for you eating it? Do you dare to say you did it on purpose?" James waved his hand and said, "You've seen through me. I did it on purpose." He was so self-justified that one couldn't refute him. I took a deep breath. Although I was in the wrong on this matter, luckily I'm not a good person. "So what? It's just a meal. I'll treat you next time." James leaned on the sofa in a lazy posture. Hearing this, a smile spread across his eyes and eyebrows. "Is it just a meal? You've been around since yesterday, haven't you?" Now that I think about it, it was also your voice saying those swear words yesterday. What was I doing at that time? James looked up at me and smiled. "Henry, who would have thought? You've become such a pervert. Not only did you peep at me taking a shower in the middle of the night, but you also hid under my bed. What's your next move? I should have guessed earlier that you had evil intentions towards me." James asserted confidently and pressed on step by step. I was so angry that my stomach ached. I knew it. Once caught by James, he would surely pour the dirtiest slurs on me to disgust me. I flatly denied it. Don't wrong an innocent person. Innocent person? James laughed. Next time before being a good person. Could you please remove the thing on your nose first? A chill ran down my spine. Only then did I suddenly remember that there was still paper stuffed in my nose. It was the result of getting excited after seeing him changing clothes. It was all over. I couldn't explain it clearly. I was so furious that I decided to fight with James. With this thought in mind, I threw a punch at James. What are you doing? James dodged skillfully, looked up at me and said, are you flying into a rage from embarrassment? It's okay if you don't admit it. Why did you hit me? Moreover, we're all brothers. If you wanted to watch me take a shower, you could have just said so. Was it really necessary to go to all this trouble? As expected, James holds a grudge and tries every means to disgust me. I gritted my teeth and said, I don't want to watch. I punched James again, and he didn't hold back either. After fighting for a long time and being extremely tired, we both stopped. Having a fight really made me feel much better. After sweating all over, I planned to use taking a shower as an excuse to avoid the current situation. James is someone who won't let himself suffer a loss. As expected, the next second, James lazily spoke up, but I'm also a fair-minded person. You saw me. Let me have a look at you this time. As James said that, he really intended to squeeze in. Finally, I couldn't help but look up at him, gritted my teeth and said, James, get out of here. In the bathroom, I began to reflect on my strange behavior in the past 2 days. Indeed, I've always firmly believed that I'm a straight man. However, I've unexpectedly had a nosebleed because of James again and again. Is this normal? This is very abnormal. Could it be true that, as James said, I have ulterior motives for him? Realizing this problem, I suddenly felt a bit flustered. How could I possibly fall in love with a man, and it's James? This is killing me. I quickly shook my head and discarded this thought, but I found that this thought seemed to be deeply rooted in my mind. I'm possessed by James. When James changes clothes, I can't help but look up. When James speaks, my eyes keep falling on his lips. James has very nice lip shapes. It looks, what am I thinking? I suddenly woke up. When I looked at James again, I could no longer refute his teasing. I suddenly felt that my thoughts were extremely vulgar. James treats me as a brother, and yet James is taking a shower again. The sound of water clearly reaches my ears. I'm very confused. I keep recalling that night in my mind, the scene I saw when I sneaked into James' house. James' bathroom door wasn't fully closed, and his voice came out through the crack. Henry, help me get my clothes. They're on the bed. I picked up the clothes and walked to the door. The door was pushed open a bit. Half an arm stuck out. James' skin isn't particularly fair, and there was water on his arm. I inexplicably swallowed my saliva. This hand hurts a lot when it hits someone. Now it seems. Unexpectedly, it looks quite good. The veins on his arm were slightly prominent. Looking further down, it was completely blocked by the bathroom door. Somehow, I furtively peeked inside. Just one glance. I was caught red-handed on the spot. The sound of water in the bathroom stopped. James looked into my eyes through the crack of the door. There was a smile in his eyes. He tilted his head to look at me, raised his eyebrows and smiled. His tone was as annoying as ever. What? Want to take a look? He pushed the door open a little more. Come on in. My heart suddenly jumped to the extreme. James continued to push the door. We're all brothers. What's wrong with taking a bath together? We're all brothers. A single sentence suddenly pulled me back to reality. I suddenly felt extremely ashamed in front of James. It's simply beastly. I closed my eyes and gave him the clothes, then suddenly shut the bathroom door tightly. Inside the bathroom, a soft chuckle from James clearly came through. I thought with a straight face, if he knew what was on my mind, he probably wouldn't be able to laugh anymore. I was in a gloomy mood during the meal. On one hand, I was sad about fully coming out of the closet. On the other hand, I mourned for James, a straight guy, being targeted by me. James has good looks, and there are quite a few girls chasing him. But there have also been boys. James rejected the boys straightforwardly. He is as straight as can be. If he knew my thoughts, we would really turn against each other. I felt a lump in my throat. James noticed and looked up at me. What an ugly expression. You look like you've just had a breakup. I haven't even been in a relationship, but I've already lost. Although James can be a bit of a scoundrel, he's very loyal. After learning about the trouble in my family, he generously offered, call me daddy, and I'll take care of you. I said expressionlessly, get lost. Getting lost is fine too. He pointed at his phone. Can you just take me out of the blacklist first? Stop always using the blacklist thing. It's like a couple having a fight. I never thought much of James talking like this before, but now, no matter how I listen, it seems to fit the situation. I can't take you out. I stuffed a mouthful of food and mumbled. My phone fell into the sewer. James was taken aback. All right then. After taking a couple of bites, I still couldn't help but beat around the bush. James, do you still remember that a guy confessed his love to you last semester? Are you still in touch with him? James didn't even lift his head. There's no way we're in touch. I was taken aback, as if I'd been shot in the heart. What's wrong? It's nothing. I forced a laugh. We're all just buddies. How could he possibly agree, right? James suddenly looked up at me. I subconsciously emphasized. If it were me, I wouldn't agree either. As soon as I finished speaking, James's face suddenly darkened. He stared at me and suddenly fell silent. The atmosphere froze. My heart skipped a beat. Could it be that he really hated me to such an extent? He couldn't even bear to hear it mentioned. After that, James seemed to have been touched on his sore spot and stopped talking altogether. He took the last bite of his meal before looking up at me. The coldness in his eyes was terrifying. Henry, he said calmly, if you don't have those feelings, don't casually flirt with others. You're really annoying. I stood there stunned, suddenly losing all my appetite. James put on his coat and went out without saying a word. When he came back, he was holding a new mobile phone in his hand. He forcefully stuffed it into my hand. Use this for now. There's a business hall downstairs where you can get a new SIM card. You can stay at my place for these few days. Don't worry. I won't be coming back. His expression and voice were extremely cold when he spoke. I stared blankly at him. My irritation also reached its peak. What do you mean? James is avoiding me. In the past, James and I have had conflicts, but I've never felt like this before. I'm extremely confused. I called out to stop James, but he didn't stop. The sound of the door closing was extremely loud. As soon as James left, the room suddenly returned to calm. I scratched my head irritably. James really keeps his word. He hasn't come back for several days. Even when he answers the phone, he only says a few simple words. Leave me alone. At night, I looked at James's moments and felt sad alone. There is a video in James's moments. James is tilting his head back and gulping down alcohol, and his Adam's apple bobs up and down with the movement. As I watched, I also gulped. Now I really realize that I'm a brute. He treats me as a brother, but I actually want to kiss him. I'm a brute. Woo-woo, I'm a brute. His neck is so white. Oh. Before I could be sad for long, someone knocked on the door. James lives alone. Who could be knocking on the door at this time? I opened the door in confusion and saw Oliver at the door. Oliver smiled when he saw me. Got some time to chat? I thought Oliver came to talk to me about ideals. I didn't expect him to talk to me about emotions. Actually, it's nothing serious. Oliver leaned on the sofa, smiling gently. Just want to tell you something. My relationship with Oliver isn't that good, so I roughly guessed it was something about James. Oliver is well known as a smiling tiger. When he says something astonishing, he always smiles. Just like now, he opened his mouth with a smile and said something that made me want to die on the spot. About the thing that you forcefully kissed James after getting drunk. I was drinking water and sprayed it out directly. What? Me? Drunk? Forcefully kissed James? I suddenly looked up. Oliver still had a smile on his face. It seems James didn't tell you about this. James also knows about this. I thought carefully. The more I thought about it, the more familiar the words seemed. It seemed that when I just sneaked into James' house, James had talked to himself about this on the phone. Henry, I advise you to get it back for me within a day. Otherwise, I'll make public the fact that you got drunk and forcefully kissed me. This was so childish that I thought James was slandering. So it was true? My mind went blank. Did I really forcefully kiss him? Oliver commented. It was quite intense. I forced myself to ask. James? Didn't resist? Oliver stroked his chin. He sort of half pushed and half yielded. I wanted to ask more, but was interrupted by Oliver. Oliver nodded. Don't you remember anything at all? But don't ask me for too many details. After all, I'm not thick-skinned enough to stare at you too. Suddenly, I felt extremely embarrassed. Oliver still said with a smile, James has been hanging out in the bar these days, getting dead drunk. I can probably tell, although I don't quite understand. But as James' friend, I still need to have a talk with you. If you really have no such intentions, then stop teasing James. This guy is so easy to be hooked. I suddenly stood up. I have. Why wouldn't I? I do have feelings for him. Oliver's smile froze on his lips. The atmosphere suddenly became awkward. But at the moment, I couldn't care less about the awkwardness. Where's James? Give me the address. Inside the bar, the lights were very dim. James was sitting in the corner, silently tilting his head back to gulp down the wine. His prominent Adam's apple bobbed up and down. The scene from the moments just reappeared before my eyes. looking at his posture of tilting his head back to drink. Those lewd thoughts popped up again. Why didn't I notice before that James really suits my taste? I made up my mind that I must clarify things today, fearing that more unexpected things might happen. I walked straight over and grabbed James' wrist. Be concise and to the point. I have those feelings. I do. James was still drinking. Suddenly, he was choked by my words and coughed violently. He looked at me in disbelief, afraid that he couldn't hear me clearly because of the noise in the bar. I raised my voice and said, I'll be responsible for you. This time, James heard me clearly. Not only James, everyone around us heard it clearly. Holding James' wrist, I turned my head stiffly. I met a circle of familiar faces. They are all good brothers I usually hang out with. They stared blankly at our clasped hands and asked, Henry, what did you just mean by taking responsibility? I seem to have heard him say that he wants to take responsibility for James. One of the brothers gave a couple of hee-hee laughs and said, what kind of responsibility does he need to take? It's not like they're in a relationship. I dragged him out of the bar with a gloomy face. Instantly, it became quiet in my ears. It was very quiet at the door. The streetlights made James look especially charming. He still smelled of alcohol. He looked up at me, putting away some of his casualness. Henry, what did you mean by taking responsibility? I already know about the drunk incident. James's eyelashes fluttered. If you're trying to take responsibility because of that, there's no need. I was stunned. It was rare to see James like this. He turned around dejectedly and walked back, his voice calm. Don't feel bad about it. Just forget it. I came here prepared to speak. How could I let the misunderstanding continue? James, I called out to him. As soon as James turned around, I directly pushed him against the wall. You. As soon as James opened his mouth, all his words were blocked at his lips. I didn't want to hear what I didn't like from him, so I simply turned my head and kissed him. I've already said that I came here with my lips this time. It's just that James' lips are softer than I imagined. Sure enough, he's really nice to kiss. This kiss only lasted for a brief second before being interrupted by a suddenly appearing person. I was almost scared out of my wits. I panicked and pushed James away to keep a distance, inexplicably having the illusion of being caught having an affair. I don't know if it was an auditory hallucination, but at the moment I panicked and pushed James away. I seemed to hear a very, very soft laugh. The person who suddenly appeared was a girl. It was still a girl who asked James for his contact information. James' eyebrows and eyes were reflected extremely handsomely under the street lamp. He shook his head and said, It's not convenient. The girl was stunned for a moment and said, What? It's not very convenient. James repeated. His peripheral vision lightly swept over me and he said, My partner won't allow it. The girl left. She had been gone for a long time. I still hadn't reacted from what James had said just now. My partner won't allow it. These 4 words hit me one by one, making my head spin. James looked at me and said, Didn't you say so? I was at a loss and said, What did I say? James gave me a deep look and said, You said you would be responsible for me. When I was being kissed by James against the wall, I was thinking, he kissed me so fiercely. My nose was filled with James' scent, surrounded and controlled by it. Finally, I was completely indulged. When we got back to the bar, someone glanced over here casually. Just one glance, and he let out a shocked scream. Henry, why is your mouth swollen? The tingling sensation on my lips hadn't faded yet. With this guy's shout, I felt my whole face heating up rapidly. It's all James' fault. I pretended to be calm and looked up at the sky. It's the spiciness. I just ate something extremely spicy. Someone poked their head over and said, Henry, don't you not eat spicy food? Suddenly, I started to like it. So suddenly? And isn't this a bar? I was so dazed from the kiss. I forgot, while I was trying hard to save the situation here, James was laughing beside me with his shoulders shaking. I couldn't hold back and gave him a hard kick. James winced in pain and lowered his voice. Are you trying to murder me? Get out of here. It's all your fault. James laughed uncontrollably. Yes. He leaned over and whispered in a low voice. Then let you kiss me back next time? You're dreaming. When I wasn't mentally prepared to go public yet. Over there, James was like a peacock showing off its feathers and couldn't help but spread the news far and wide. At the party, someone said the wine was delicious. James leaned over and smiled. Yes. How did you know I got confessed to and am now in a relationship? During the meal, someone said the dishes were delicious. James quickly chimed in. Yes. How did you know I got confessed to and am now in a relationship? These words kept ringing in the ears of the guys all the time. They finally couldn't stand it anymore. Who on earth confessed to James? He's so full of himself. The guys in the group looked at each other in bewilderment. No one knew. Only Oliver beside them smiled without saying a word. I also couldn't stand it anymore and grabbed James. Stop spreading rumors. Who confessed to you? You did. I was shocked. When did I confess my love? James looked up at me. You said you'd take responsibility for me. The bankruptcy crisis was temporarily over, and I had to move back home again. Before leaving, I asked James when he realized he liked me. Was it because of that forced kiss? James was stunned. He was shocked. You don't really think I'd let someone force kiss me at will, do you? It wasn't when I was drunk, so he must have had feelings for me before that. I also looked at him in shock. I regarded you as a brother, and yet you. Before I could finish my sentence, James suddenly tilted his head and leaned in. An unexpected kiss. It was very light and gentle. Oh, James retorted. Is this how you regard me as a brother? He clapped his hands. What a pure brotherly love. I was rendered speechless by his question. I really couldn't remember how I forced that kiss at that time. But there seemed to be one thing I couldn't deny. It seemed that I did have an impulse towards James' lips when I first saw them. I thought at that time that I simply found him annoying. Want to shut it up. It turns out that kind of impulse was to kiss. I suddenly realized. James held my chin and looked into my eyes. What about you? When did you come to your senses? Thinking about this question, I subconsciously remembered the 2 times when I had a nosebleed looking at James' figure during those days in the invisibility cloak. James was still waiting for an answer. I just turned around and left. How can I say this? Beast. I said I'd never be able to hold my head up in front of James for the rest of my life. I kept silent and prepared to bypass this topic. James' voice sounded faintly behind me. He was very sure of himself. Hey, Song, you're lusting after my body. I staggered and shook my head to deny it. How could that be? There's no such thing. Last time, I saw you having a nosebleed looking at me. You saw wrong. And it wasn't just once. I got angry from embarrassment. So what if I wanted to look? Am I not allowed to? James finally burst out laughing. Anytime. You're more than welcome. In the bathroom, I received a voice message from James. I wiped my hands and replied, taking a shower. Do not disturb. The next second, James made a video call. Let me see you taking a shower. James' birthday is coming soon. On the night before his birthday, I finally remembered my invisibility cloak. Once again, I sneaked into James' house. Coincidentally, history always repeats itself in an astonishing way. James was in the bathroom again. This time, I could finally peep openly. I don't know if it's the lover's filter. James looked even more likely to arouse impure thoughts than last time. But different from last time. This time I could do whatever I wanted. Looking at James' wrists, I always felt that something was missing on them. Missing something that could tie the wrists. I rummaged around in the cabinet and finally found a usable one. So, as soon as James came out of the bathroom, he watched helplessly as his wrists were tied by a suddenly appearing black rope. He looked down quietly without any intention of resistance. After tying his wrists, I pushed James onto the sofa. James smells very nice, with the refreshing scent of just having taken a shower. I greedily sniffed and said, robbery. James cooperated extremely well. He hooked his lips and smiled, saying, what should I do? I only have my beauty. I raised my eyebrows and said, then I'll rob your beauty. The smile on James' lips deepened. I've wanted to do this for a long time. Pin James down and kiss these lips that look so kissable. Our lips lightly touched, and a tingle spread throughout my body. Amid the blurriness, I heard James' smiling words. Henry, I like you so much. I responded while kissing. Me too. In the middle of the kiss, suddenly there were quite a few footsteps at the door, along with a few perfunctory knocks on the door. I heard a few very familiar voices. Why knock? Oliver has the key, right? A surprise should be a direct entry. Oliver was silent for a few seconds and said, I think we'd better not. It's almost 12 o'clock. Give it to me. Let me do it. James and I froze instantly. For the first time, an expression close to collapse appeared on James' face. Don't. Before the words don't open could come out, the sound of the key turning was extremely clear. James and I were petrified and had no time to react at all. We watched helplessly as the door was pushed open, and a crowd of people squeezed in. What's worse, the invisibility cloak malfunctioned at this moment. The door was completely opened. There was a loud bang. The fireworks exploded in the air. Countless streamers and sequins fluttered down, covering the living room entrance. The next second, we heard the unison blessings. James, happy birthday. As soon as the voice fell, a group of people rushed into the living room to look for someone. After seeing the real scene in the living room, there was a deathly silence. The group of people froze at the door, as if petrified, looking at the 2 people on the sofa. I was wearing a transparent coat from God knows where, lying on top of James, with a red tint around my lips, and James, the protagonist of the celebration, was pinned underneath. His wrists were still tied with an unknown black cloth. Similarly, the corners of the lips are flushed. This silence lasted for several minutes. Oliver was the first to break the silence. His usually steady voice now carried an obvious sense of embarrassment. With a stiff expression, he quickly glanced around. Sorry, we came at a bad time. I didn't know you were. Oliver stopped speaking at just the right moment. Right after he finished speaking, the other guys made a unified sound. We didn't see anything. I stiffened my body and never dared to look up. The chaotic voices gradually faded outside the door. The living room returned to silence again. The voices outside the door continued. They were louder and louder. Swear words. What did I see? Henry and James? Tell me this isn't true. Could the girlfriend James mentioned be Henry? Oliver's calm voice was like a thunderbolt. Yes. Keep your voice down. Let's go. I said not to be reckless when the door opened. Someone hugged their head and cried. I really regret not listening to you. Will we be silenced by James and Henry? In a way, they are quite a match. Until the sound completely disappeared, I still couldn't come to my senses. I can't believe it. My lifetime of good reputation will be completely ruined at this moment. I also blushed completely, except for his reddened earlobes. James remained the same as usual. He looked up at me, and his eyes were not clear. He opened his mouth and asked me hoarsely, Everyone's gone. Shall we continue? I was shocked. He still has the mood to continue. I'm too ashamed to face it anymore. Just as I got up, I was suddenly pulled back by James. I don't know when James untied the black rope. He wrapped the black rope around his finger in circles, and his eyes kept falling on me. Your game is over. As James said, he reached out and grabbed my wrist. Shouldn't mine start now? James, you? The remaining words were stuck on the tip of my tongue. I couldn't say a word at all.